It was July 2025 at the annual Freedom Fest in Centerville, Utah, a community Independence Day celebration at a packed park. Without warning, a sudden explosion flared at ground level in the crowd. Amid the flashes, a police officer on patrol spotted a lit mortar-style firework hissing on the ground. He instinctively raced over and tried to extinguish the fuse by stomping on it with his boot. Seconds later, the device exploded at his feet with a blinding flash and bang. The blast tore a hole through the officer's pant leg. The heat was so intense it melted his trousers onto his skin, inflicting a searing burn on his lower calf. Nearby families screamed and ducked for cover as fiery debris sprayed outward. Thankfully, their injuries were not serious. Paramedics at the scene treated the girl's burns and shock on site. The officer, though limping in pain, had no life-threatening injuries either. Almost immediately, other officers in the vicinity began shouting and scanning the crowd for who was responsible. Witnesses reported seeing a pair of teenagers fleeing just after the firework went off, sparking a brief foot chase through the panicked throng. Within minutes, police detained several juveniles who had been near the blast and tried to run. Investigators later used multiple surveillance camera recordings from around the park. It turned out that 2 local teenage boys had lit an illegal aerial firework and hurled it into the dense crowd for a prank. To figure out exactly what happened, whether they intended to target the officers specifically is unclear. But authorities noted the teens were looking right at the cop, and the firework landed directly at his feet.
There's really no excuse for anybody lighting those type of fireworks in a crowd like that.
In the aftermath, the 2 suspects, both minors, were arrested once video evidence confirmed their actions. They were promptly taken to a juvenile detention facility, facing possible felony charges for causing the explosion and injuring several people. Police indicated the teens could be charged with using an explosive device to cause injury and assault on a police officer, among other crimes. As investigators interviewed shaken witnesses, cleanup crews swept up spent fireworks and trampled lawn chairs at the scene. What began as a night of community celebration had ended with an officer on a stretcher. In the days that followed, Centerville officials reassured the public that they would reevaluate event security and urge parents to keep fireworks out of the hands of kids. The Freedom Fest disaster was a stark lesson in how a single thoughtless act can nearly turn a family festival into tragedy. July 3rd, 2023, the eve of Independence Day, in the small city of Allegan, Michigan was supposed to end with a spectacular fireworks finale over the river. As night fell, the fireworks began to launch from their designated area, some fired from pontoons on the Kalamazoo River, and others from a proximate display just 90 feet away from a pedestrian boardwalk. Families gazed upward at the colorful bursts in delight, unaware that one massive firework cake had just malfunctioned down by the launch zone. Suddenly, a rapid series of explosions erupted much lower than expected, sending fiery projectiles blasting horizontally into the crowd of onlookers. A large multi-shot firework cake had misfired and tipped, aiming its rockets straight at the audience on the bank. A bystander's cell phone video captures the horrifying moment. An eruption of sparks at ground level followed by screams. Everyone bolted from their seats, ducking and stumbling over blankets as embers showered down. Amidst the panicked shouts, some people could be heard crying out names, searching for their family members in the smoky confusion. When the smoke cleared, miraculously no one was killed, but several people had been hurt. The Allegan Fire District reported that a handful of spectators suffered burn injuries from the misfired fireworks. First responders rushed to help the injured, treating about 5 people at the scene for minor burns and abrasions. The crowd, still trembling from the shock, watched as paramedics applied burn dressings and bandages. One eyewitness described seeing an unexploded firework land between his toddler daughter's legs, a heart-stopping near miss, but he managed to snatch it away before it went off. Another mother found herself scooping up her kids and sprinting for cover when the firework barrage rained down. 2 of her family members were hit and left with minor burns. Despite the fear and confusion, many good Samaritans in the crowd immediately jumped into action to help the injured. People immediately started asking, "Are you okay?" One mother recalled. Bystanders dug into their coolers for bottled water and ice. They pressed cold packs and ice on the burn wounds of those who'd been hit, trying to soothe searing skin until EMTs arrived. The Jubilee's grand finale was abruptly canceled after the misfire. Somehow, one of the proximate fireworks, designed for close-range shows, misangled and shot toward spectators, violating those safety expectations. Allegan's fire chief noted that all proper permits and precautions were in place, and that accidents like this, while rare, can occur even with experienced crews. In the end, the Allegan misfire underscored how even a well-planned professional show can descend into chaos in the blink of an eye, sending families running for their lives amid what should have been a night of celebration, leaving the riverfront silent except for wailing sirens. On July 4th, 2025, revelers on Boone Lake in Tennessee were treated to a stunning sight, not the planned fireworks spectacle, but a fiery disaster that few will ever forget. Every Independence Day, boats gather around a launch barge on Boone Lake for a floating fireworks show. A crew of 8 people was out on a barge near Boone Lake Marina, loading and igniting consumer-grade fireworks for the holiday display. Without warning, an accidental spark ignited the entire cache of fireworks on the barge all at once. In an instant, the floating platform erupted into a massive fireball, triggering a chain reaction of explosions that turned night into day. A spectator's video footage caught the surreal scene. The barge became a fountain of exploding shells, shooting rockets and Roman candles in every direction over the water. Boaters gasped as the cascade of fireworks blasted toward them, far outside the planned safety zone. Several of the nearest boats had to gun their engines and desperately speed away to escape the onslaught of errant pyrotechnics. Amid the cacophony of pops and bangs, the silhouettes of frantic boaters can be seen steering away under showers of sparks. The lake echoed with shouts of alarm and the roar of boat motors as people fled for safety. On the barge itself, the crew was caught in an inferno. The initial blast knocked some crew members off their feet, and the rest of the fireworks stockpile began to cook off in rapid succession around them. 8 people were injured in the mayhem, according to the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency's report. Astonishingly, all 8 were the crew and assistants who had been on the barge, meaning every person on the platform was hurt by the explosion. 2 crew members sustained severe injuries, including serious burns, and had to be airlifted to the hospital in critical condition. The other 6 workers were lucky to escape with only minor injuries like singed hair and first-degree burns. Many of the boaters on the water, by sheer fortune, were far enough back to avoid injury as they scattered away from the floating firestorm. The entire barge was engulfed in flames, lighting up the lake like a giant torch. Emergency sirens blared from the shoreline as firefighting boats and rescue watercraft rushed toward the blazing platform. By the time firefighters extinguished the blaze, the barge had been completely destroyed, reduced to a charred, smoking husk, still bobbing on the water. Burning debris from the blast was scattered across the lake's surface. It was truly a 4th of July nightmare, unfolding live in front of hundreds of stunned spectators. It was like a war zone out there on the water, one witness told local news, describing the panicked flight of boats as fireworks shot over their heads. In the aftermath, investigators converged to determine what had caused the catastrophe. The Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency, TWRA, gathered preliminary information and noted that because the incident happened on a commercial vessel, jurisdiction would pass to the U.S. Coast Guard for a full investigation. Early reports indicated that a premature ignition, essentially a spark or flame where it shouldn't have been, set off the entire remaining batch of fireworks on the barge in one thunderous blast. All signs pointed to this being a terrible accident, not any foul play. The organizers had been using legally purchased consumer fireworks rather than high-grade professional shells, which might have contributed to the volatility on a small barge. The TWRA confirmed the injury count at 8 people, with 2 seriously hurt by burns or trauma. Miraculously, no spectators were killed, and the 2 critically injured crew members eventually stabilized after hospital treatment. Boone Lake's 2025 fireworks disaster stands as a vivid reminder of how quickly a celebratory show can turn into a life-threatening emergency, especially when you're on the water with nowhere to run. Observers later remarked that it was a blessing more boats weren't close by, or the toll could have been far worse.
Today at 4:30 with a warning from emergency crews after a fireworks accident in northwest Indiana.
On a warm Saturday night, June 29, 2024, on North Arbogast Street in Griffith, Indiana, by 9:30 p.m., an unseen danger was lurking among the fireworks as the first few fireworks shot up from the family's launch area, a critical malfunction waiting to happen. Without warning, an unknown malfunction caused one of the fireworks to explode prematurely at ground level. In an instant, the entire stash of fireworks meant for the show ignited in a chain reaction. A neighbor's surveillance camera captured the terrifying moment. One frame shows the peaceful street, and the next is lit by a sudden blinding flash of white light as if a bomb went off. An ear-splitting boom rattled through the neighborhood, followed by a rapid barrage of fireworks shooting in all directions. Another security camera's footage, from a different angle, reveals brilliant bursts of green and red exploding outward at ground level, accompanied by the panicked screams of onlookers. The front yard launch site had become a war zone in the blink of an eye. The shockwave rocked nearby houses, shattering the quiet evening. One resident, Cliff Edwards, was relaxing in his home down the street when he felt the concussion through his walls. "I heard a big explosion, and I come out, and I see a bunch of people running, and the whole neighborhood was nothing but smoke," he later recounted. He stepped outside to a surreal scene. A thick haze of smoke hung in the air, lit by the flicker of residual embers, and between 50 to 80 people were sprinting in every direction in sheer panic. It really was surreal. You couldn't believe it's happening on your block, Edward said, describing how people screamed and scattered, many in disbelief that a fun gathering had so suddenly turned into chaos. Some neighbors initially thought a house gas line or even a car might have exploded, given the thunderous sound and shock. Debris rained down across the residential street, and as the smoke began to clear, Edwards noticed shredded pieces of metal and cardboard, spent fireworks casings, littering his yard and even inside his house. When frightened parents and neighbors regrouped, the scale of the accident became apparent. 7 people had been injured in the blast, according to police reports. Incredibly, despite the ferocity of the explosion, all 7 victims survived, but their injuries were real. Some suffered burns, others cuts and bruises from flying debris. In fact, the homeowners later said most of the injured were members of their own group, friends and family, who had been standing closest. Several were sent to the hospital that night, though authorities did not publicly release their names or medical conditions. Neighbors soon discovered that the blast had damaged at least 4 homes and 10 cars in the vicinity as well. The powerful explosion had literally sent pieces of fireworks rocketing into people's houses. All the shelves fell. All the pictures fell. We thought maybe a car exploded, Edwards said. Fire trucks, police cruisers, and ambulances flooded the block within minutes, their lights strobing against the houses. Dozens of shaken residents looked on from the sidewalks as EMTs tended to the injured and firefighters doused small fires smoldering in the yard. The family who hosted the event, distraught and in shock, cooperated fully with authorities. They emphasized, and investigators concurred, that this was a tragic accident likely caused by a faulty firework device. Indeed, after an in-depth review, the fire marshal and detectives determined no crimes were committed, no charges were filed in this case. The explosion's source was traced to a larger aerial firework, reportedly launched from a metal bucket, that blew up instantly rather than firing upward, igniting the rest of the stash on the ground. The 2013 4th of July celebration in Simi Valley, California, was one of the region's biggest, drawing an estimated 10,000 spectators to a public park for the annual extravaganza. The fireworks launch site was set up about a few hundred feet away from the crowd, where professionals had arranged racks of mortar tubes for the big show. One massive 5-inch shell was a dud in the making. Instead of shooting skyward, that shell failed to leave its mortar tube and exploded in place. What happened next was a chain reaction catastrophe. The blast from the misfired shell knocked over other firework racks, setting off a domino effect of explosions at ground level. In an instant, the Simi Valley sky and ground erupted. Witnesses described a fireball followed by a hissing barrage of rockets firing horizontally into the crowd, tracer trails of sparks whipping past terrified onlookers. Thousands of people jumping to their feet, scrambling for any cover they could find. Some dove behind picnic tables or trash barrels. Others simply hit the ground and covered their heads as explosions peppered the open field. The entire misfire sequence lasted only a few seconds, but the damage was devastating. 28 people were injured in the blast and ensuing chaos. None of the injuries were life-threatening, but it was a gruesome scene. We're left bloodied and burned by flying shrapnel and flaming debris. It was like shrapnel, like a bomb went off, one witness said of the fragments that sprayed the crowd. 20 people had to be rushed to local hospitals for treatment. Most suffered what officials described as shrapnel-like cuts and burns from the exploding mortar and its contents. Some people's clothes were scorched with tiny ember holes. A few sustained broken bones or sprains in the mad scramble to escape. The site, which moments before had been an orderly audience area, was now littered with abandoned coolers, overturned strollers, and personal items dropped in the rush. As the initial shock subsided, responders quickly set up a triage area. Paramedics and even some audience members trained in first aid tended to the wounded amid the acrid smell of spent gunpowder. It was a scene of July 4th carnage that Simi Valley had never experienced. In the days after, an intensive investigation by CAL FIRE, the Ventura County Fire Department, and Cal OSHA sought to determine exactly what went wrong. Their conclusion: a single faulty shell caused the disaster. There was no evidence of human error or sabotage, just a tragic technical malfunction that had catastrophic results. All of the information we have indicates that there was simply a tragic malfunction that resulted in the explosions, Ventura County's fire chief reported.
Oh my